Hello everybody, my name is Heather, and today we are going to solve another mystery. I have decided to solve the mystery by Agatha Christie called Hallowe'en Party. So grab a cup of coffee or some tea or whatever your favorite drink is and the book Hallowe'en Party, and let's get started figuring out who the murderer is. If you don't know, my name is Heather and I enjoy reading. So that's what we do here. We talk about all things books. Today, we're going to be going through Hallowe'en Party. I'm going to check in with you after every chapter or two, depending on the information that's given. I'm going to try and do it a little different than the last one that I did. Last one, I just never checked in until like 4 or 5 chapters later. I just spewed out all the information and didn't really find any clues or write down any information or anything. I just listened or read and went along with the story. This time I'm actually going to take notes and everything so I can actually try and figure out who the murderer is and why they did it. I may not know why they did it, but I may find out who it is. I've come close the past 2 times I've read Agatha Christie, but I still have gotten it wrong. So this time, I may get it. So, Hallowe'en Party it is. Since Halloween is a week away, as of recording at this moment, it is Monday. So, I'm going to read for the next hour while my daughter's in ballet, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. I'm really, really excited. I love Agatha Christie, and I hope you're all excited as well. So, let's get started. I finished reading the first chapter. Or I finished listening to the first chapter. So it was basically just a setup of things that were happening. You have the main character, well, one of the main characters, Mrs. Oliver, who loves apples and writes murder mystery novels. And she's helping a friend set up a party in this small town. They're having a Halloween party, and she's helping with the preparations of everything that's going on. So you have several characters that are going on and that are introduced in here. You have Miss Oliver's friend, I think her name is Judith, can't remember the last name, and then the hostess that is having the party at her house, I think is Miss Darby. I'm not really sure about that one. I'll have to look it up. I do have notes, but they're on my phone. But I'm using my phone to record, so I can't look at them. I forgot to bring my notebook to write them in, but it is what it is at this point. So, that is what's going on. Miss Oliver has been introduced to several characters. There's one young lady in particular whose name is Joyce, who is very interested in the fact that she writes murder mystery novels and even claims that she has seen a murder, and most of the adults dismiss her and tell her to stop being silly, and the other students, while interested at first, after she talks for a minute, realizes and believes that she is just saying it to be silly, I guess, and lying, and laughs at her, and everything moves on, and they continue with preparations for the party. And there's a lot of hoopla about the apples and the bobbing for apples, talking about they need a galvanized tub, and it was mentioned several times that they need a galvanized tub instead of a plastic one because it won't tip over as easy. So I'm guessing that's gonna have something to do with the murder, and I really think it's gonna be Joyce because she is very interested in murder, and and the fact that she has claimed that she has seen a murder. I really think it's going to be her that ends up dying, and I hate that because I hate when children die, and I think she's pretty young. The youngest, I think, they said was like 11 or 10. I don't know. They're having an 11 plus party, which means you're 11 and older, and so It's a Halloween party, but they claim it's 11 plus because they don't like Halloween, naming it a Halloween party. Anyway, that's what I've gathered from it so far. I haven't gotten past that. The last thing I read was when Miss Oliver ran into this couple, a young woman or a young lady who was 11 or 12 and maybe a little older, and then a young boy who is around 15-ish is what she said from what it looks like, and they were apparently being very affectionate and cuddling and snuggling up to each other, and I'm assuming they were making out in a corner, and Miss Oliver needed to get into the room that they were standing in front of, and so she said that they were selfish. And then when she got in the room, she heard the couple out there saying that she was selfish and should have realized that they wanted some alone time and to leave them alone. I just thought it was funny. I don't think it really has anything to do with the murder, but I just thought it was kind of funny that she said something similar, and when she finally got them to move out of the way so she could get in the room, they also said it as well. Yeah, so that's where I am currently. I will be moving on to what's next, which I'm assuming is going to be a murder and everything else. Okay, a quick update on the Halloween party. Okay, so Joyce was the one that died. I got that right. And what I've read so far is they found her and she was drowned in the bobbing apples galvanized bucket thing. I knew that was going to have some kind of part because they were very adamant about having a galvanized bucket several times in that one chapter. It was like 3 or 4 times it was said, we need a galvanized bucket, we need a galvanized bucket. So I've come to see that whenever something is said more than once in an Agatha Christie book, it's going to come up later. Hopefully you can't hear my husband's outside sanding some things for work, so if you can hear it, sorry, that's what that noise is. But let's see. So they found Joyce, and Mrs. Oliver has called Hercule Poirot and has explained, or basically said that she wanted to come to speak to him, and he agreed, even though he didn't want to because he knows that she can talk a lot and he didn't really want to sit there and listen to her talk, but he agreed. And she came and she explained what had happened and about Joyce saying that she had seen a murder, and she thinks that may actually have something to do with it. And Poirot was like, do you really think so? And he said, do you believe her? And she was like, I didn't at first, but now I'm thinking it may have some kind of part to it. So that was interesting, and that's what's going on. He has spoken to her, and now he's going to meet with an old friend. And so I'm going to listen to that and take some notes and figure out. She did say, I did take some notes on where is it? I have it here. I did take some notes on what exactly she was saying. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Okay, yes. Mrs. Oliver said there was about 25 to 30 people. There were several girls between the ages of 11 and 15, and then there were 2 boys between the ages of 16 and 18, and then several 5 to 6 women and other adults there. So that's what she has explained to Poirot. So I'll find out more details coming up and keep going on and see where exactly it takes us. It may be a little different going forward. Since I am listening to an audiobook, the one I'm listening to doesn't tell me where chapters begin and end like other audiobooks do, so I'm kind of just having to pick out spaces where it switches from one person to another. And I am currently in the middle of making pizza dough, so I'm just going to listen until I'm done making pizza dough, and it takes a good minute for me to knead the dough, and I just wanted something to listen to while I'm kneading it, so that's what I'm going to be doing. And sorry if it's a little jiggly. I'm going to try not to make it so, but you know, sometimes it happens that way. I just wanted to sit down and do a quick update, and this is the only place I have it, and I don't really have anywhere to sit you without it being all wobbly, and it's still really loud. Hopefully it's not coming through on the audio. So anyway, I'm gonna go make this pizza dough while I listen, and I will give you an update here shortly. Okay, I'm back. We are going to be getting through. I'm gonna try and get through as much as I can. My husband is still out there sanding things, so you may hear some stuff, so there's that. Hopefully it won't pick it up, but it may happen. Anyway, I'm going to try and get through as much as possible. I did find this whiteboard. I am going to be erasing it and writing notes down so I can maybe stick it up here. I don't know. But that's the good thing about homeschooling, is that you always have extra things lying around. That's what I have here. And so I'm going to erase this stuff that my kids have put on here, and I'm going to use it for a info board. Okay, there. It's clean, mostly. It'll work for what I'm using it for. Anyway, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and get as much done. I'm actually sitting on the floor right now because it'll be more comfortable. Plus, while I'm listening to the book, I'm going to be folding clothes, so it's easier for me to sit on the floor while I fold clothes. And that way I can have this handy and everything else, and things won't echo. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. So that's why I am on the floor. Anyway, let's get started. I read or listened to a little bit more while I was making pizza dough, and what we got is Joyce has been killed. She said that she saw a murder and then was killed. Yeah, Mrs. Oliver. She writes murder mystery novels. Then we have Hercule Poirot, and we know who that is, but we're not going to put him on there because he's the one solving the mystery. We're going to just put that. Then we also have Hercule Poirot's friend, Mr. Spence. He is a police detective, and he went to visit him because he lives in the same town. And so he's learning about several things, or he asked him about the stuff that's going on in the town, in the neighborhood, and all this other kind of thing, all these other things. He asked his opinion, and you know what's really funny is that they say a lot of the same things. Both Miss Oliver and Spence, and even the next person that I'm going to get to, who Hercule and Poirot and Miss Oliver went to go see, they all say the same thing. And so it's one of those things. It's kind of interesting, and it throws up a little flag of what's going on here. Anyway, so we have Spence, who has a very police-like mind because he was a former policeman. So he's going through and describing all these things that could have happened, and you know, so there's that. And then once Poirot leaves Spence's house, he meets with Miss Oliver again, and they go and visit Miss Drake. So I'm going to write her on here. Miss Drake. She is a widow. and she was the hostess of the party. And she doesn't like Joyce, did not like Joyce. Now, I say both, but she and Spence and Miss Oliver all said the same thing about mentally disturbed people, how they are not admitted into the mental institution anymore, and they're let out and then they commit another crime, and they all say that, and they all assume that someone broke into the party or came in the party unannounced and undetected and ended up killing Joyce. But I will say that Spence, the policeman or ex-policeman, retired policeman, he didn't think that was very likely. You could tell that there was a hint of it's possible, but I doubt that happened type deal. But there's that. Then they move on to visiting Joyce's mom, and I cannot remember her name. And I did want to go back and listen to the beginning of it. I think I was a little bit distracted and I forgot a little bit, so I may do that. But anyway, that's where we are. They're visiting Joyce's mom, and she was not at the party, but I think she was at the actual at the preparations at the beginning that Miss Oliver was at, but she doesn't remember Joyce saying anything about seeing a murder, and she doesn't believe that Joyce would lie about something like that also, but she doesn't understand why Joyce would say something like that. So it's something. One thing I will say, typically with children being victims, it usually ends up being the parent. So that's one red flag, is the fact that she wasn't actually at the party, so she could have slipped in, and the person that drew Joyce away had to have been someone that she trusted, because what teenagers and children are not going to go with some stranger to play a game. It's just not common, really. So honestly, with her not being at the party, that kind of throws a little red flag up for me that it could possibly be her mom. But I don't know. We'll find out. So then they go and see the brother, and the brother is very uninterested, and it seems like he's not really affected at all about his sister's death, and even at one point says that she's stupid and always wants attention, and he's just blunt, completely blunt. And that's very strange to me, because even if you think that your sister or your sibling is not very bright and begs for attention and does things just to get attention, I feel like that you would be a little more upset about it than he was. And the same thing for the older sister. I think her name was Anne. Yep, I think her name was Anne. She was very busy and very trying to do things in her room, and none of them really seemed upset about their family member dying, especially in the way that they did, or even concerned. The mom seemed a little bit upset, but it just wasn't one of those. It just was a little strange to me, just a little strange. Anyway, that's where I'm at right now. Anne did say that Joyce was a liar, and she said she didn't like to say that because she was dead and she didn't feel like speaking badly about her, but she did say that she didn't like to tell lies, and so everybody knew that, and that's part of the reason why people don't like her. That's where I'm at, and I'll continue reading while I fold these clothes now, and I'll come back shortly. I'm gonna write some more information down and then I will put it up so maybe we can all see and then figure out what's going on. So yes, I will be back shortly. Okay, so I've actually listened to quite a bit, and so I'm gonna stop here and give a little bit of an update. I do have a board listed with all of the things, but I don't even know if you can see. My handwriting's not that neat, especially on a whiteboard. Okay, so I'll just go over everything that I have on here. So after Poirot left Mrs. Oliver, he went and had lunch with his friend Spencer, I think, or Spence, and his sister. I can't remember her name, but they were sitting there and they were talking about Joyce's murder, and the sister said that she believed that she did tell a lot of lies and all this other kind of stuff, but also knew, like, just like the boy cried wolf, it could have easily have been she was actually telling the truth this time. It's just that she had lied so many times in the past that it was overlooked because of all the lies, just like in the boy cried wolf. So there was that, and then the friend Spence, I'm just gonna say Spence, I don't know if it's Spence or Spencer, can't remember, I don't have it written down, but he gave a list of possible murders that Joyce could have seen, and there are 4 of them, and one of them was Llewellyn Smythe, and she died suddenly, but it wasn't unexpected because she had heart problems. She moved from abroad back to this town to be closer to her niece and nephew, which is Mr. and Mrs. Drake, and she ended up rewriting her will and giving all of her money to another young lady that she had met abroad, and instead of her niece and nephew. So that's the first one. And the second one was Charlotte Benfield, which was a 16-year-old, and she was possibly killed by a few young men. She had multiple head wounds and everything. The third one was a man named Leslie. I didn't get his last name, I forgot, and he was stabbed in the back. His wasn't solved either. And then the last one was Janet White, and she was a school teacher, and she was strangled to death on her way home from school, and hers wasn't solved either. And so Poirot thinks that this one is the most likely one that Joyce could have seen. And so yeah, there's that. Then we have Poirot leaving there and going to visit the school teachers, and he was talking specifically to Miss Whitaker, and she said that during the Snapdragon, she walked out and saw Miss Drake on the stairs, and she was holding a big vase in front of her, but she wasn't looking down the stairs, she was looking towards the library down the hall. And then she was startled by something coming out of the library and dropped the vase. So there is that. And then we have Mrs. Whitaker, who is giving the events of the night in order, and the order that she has it is they decorated the brooms, and then they did a balloon game, did the mirror thing where they saw their true love, and then obstacle something, and then the sixpence flower cutting thing, dancing and supper, and then the Snapdragon was last. And that is where I am now. It was quite a bit of information actually, but as of right now my possible suspects that are in my head, it is very curious about Miss Drake. I was wondering about her at the beginning because of how she was very reluctant to say that she didn't really care for Joyce, even though, I mean, there were other people that have just come out and say it, like, I know she's dead. She didn't tend to lie a whole lot. And so for her to even just completely disregard wanting to answer Poirot when he asked if she was a good person, if she thought Joyce was a good person, it kind of threw up a little bit of a red flag for me. So she has been on my list since then, but definitely now raises a few other flags with the Llewellyn Smythe thing. I'm wondering if she possibly was upset that happened. With the Llewellyn Smythe thing, it was said that the will was actually, what is the word I'm looking for? Forged by the young lady. But I'm wondering if it's not true and it was just pushed that way because of Mrs. Drake. And I'm wondering if Mrs. Drake had the hand in helping Llewellyn Smythe pass along faster. But who knows? We won't know that yet. So there's that, and then also the thing that Miss Whittaker said, that Miss Drake was seen during the Snapdragon on top of the staircase trying to hide something, and she didn't even say anything about being startled and breaking a vase or anything to Mrs. Whittaker, even though she knew that Mrs. Whittaker saw her. And it just, yeah, it's a little bit of strange things going on, but I also feel that is too obvious because that is what Agatha Christie likes to do. She likes to throw obvious things out there to kind of pull you along one way when it's really another way. And then also she likes to throw the obvious stuff out there and then make you think that it's too obvious and then twist it to another way and then just be like, psych, it was actually that person, really. So, too early to really tell who it is just yet. I am still suspecting the mother and also Mrs. Drake. Those are my two that I have so far. Possibly the sister. I'm not really sure the sister would do it though, but you know, mostly the mom and Mrs. Drake. However, I will say that it did say that the person that murdered them would have to be wet, and if the mom wasn't wet, then I mean, she could have easily slipped out and gone home and changed and then came back. So who knows? Those are my thoughts. I know it's kind of all over the place at the moment, but as I get more information, it may start falling into place. But I'm going to stop here and we're going to move on. Okay, so previously we finished reading where Hercule Poirot met with the two teachers, and now he left there and went to the place that Llewellyn Smythe turned the quarry into a garden with the help of Michael Garfield. While he was there walking around, he met Michael Garfield there, had a brief conversation, and then left to meet a young girl named Miranda, which is Judith Butler's daughter. Judith Butler is Mrs. Oliver's friend that she's been staying with. So Miranda has been talking to Hercule Poirot, and he finds out that she is friends with Joyce and actually walks in the quarry very often and has seen something, but she didn't say. that's the gist that I got from it, that she has seen something, but she's not going to say because either she's frightened or she just doesn't know if it's true or not. So we go there, and then he leaves there and then goes and talks to Mrs. Drake again. Well, actually, I take that back. He goes and talks to the lawyer of Llewellyn Smythe and Mr. and Mrs. Drake. He was their lawyer. And so he hears about all of that situation, and he talks to the lawyer about the young man, Leslie. I can't remember the last name. It starts like Ferrari or something like that. But Poirot talks to the lawyer about this young man and gets a little bit of information. And then they talk a little bit about the au pair, which her name ends up being Olga. The au pair is the young lady that was helping Llewellyn Smythe. And so we go about that, and he tells him about her and the forgery. And then once Poirot leaves, it's kind of like a little bit of a flashback of his conversation with Olga, and she is adamantly saying that she did not forge, that's a real document that Miss Llewellyn Smythe actually did do, and had the gardener and I can't remember who else sign it, that she didn't forge it. It's a real document. And then she is frightened that she's going to be put in prison because of the things that have happened in her life. And so she runs away, and nobody has seen her since that moment. And the lawyer is even wondering where exactly she went. Then we have Poirot going to see Mrs. Drake again. And he sits down and has a really long conversation with Mrs. Drake, and you start to see that she is definitely hiding something, because she completely denies what Mrs. Whitaker, the teacher, said about her possibly seeing someone in the library. She denies that, and also she starts going on about her husband and how he was hit with a car and it was an accident. And so there's a lot of things that she said that brought a few things to mind. Okay, now that I've said that, here is where I am, or this is what I am thinking. Okay, so Joyce possibly saw Mrs. Drake, or someone that is along the ride with Mrs. Drake, or that had teamed up with Mrs. Drake. I am wondering just a little bit if all of these murders that have happened, since they are all unsolved, are possibly related in some form or fashion. That is one thing I am wondering about. Oh yeah, there was also apparently a murder in the quarry as well, and they haven't gone over that one, so I don't really know what happened with that. But my thoughts so far is that it could possibly be someone with Mrs. Drake. I'm gonna say that she possibly was having an affair with somebody, and that person she was having an affair with struck her husband with a car, and this person that struck her husband with the car was never found, and her husband was hit with a very popular and common car, so it was very hard to track down. So to me, it feels like the clues with her husband are very, I don't know, the words are not coming out right now, but basically I feel like Mrs. Drake is definitely involved somehow, and that she possibly was having an affair because her husband had polio and he was an invalid, and he was crippled a little bit from having polio, and she basically wanted him out of her life, is what I'm thinking, just a little bit. No, it may not be true, but that's where I'm at this moment. And honestly, I feel like it's possibly Michael Garfield. Why else would he be staying there? He's also described as a very beautiful man, and even Poirot is like, you normally don't describe people as, or men as beautiful. Normally it's handsome, or anything else besides beautiful, but he described Michael Garfield as beautiful. So that makes me wonder if Mrs. Drake had a thing for Michael Garfield and possibly had an affair with him and wanted to get Mr. Drake, her husband, out of the picture. And then, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on. There's also something, I want to say that it was hinted at that Olga was possibly in a relationship with the Leslie guy that was murdered as well. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on in this moment. There's a lot of information just being thrown out, and I'm trying to sort through it in my brain, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading, and and then I'll come back as soon as I get some more information, and hopefully we'll figure out who the murderer is pretty soon. After he left Mrs. Drake, some things have happened. A lady, Mrs. Lehman, showed up at Mrs. Butler's house and started talking to Mrs. Oliver. And she told Mrs. Oliver that she actually did meet with and see and sign the original will that Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe wrote for the au pair lady, Olga. And that one was not forged. It was a real will and a real document. And so the other one is you're trying to figure out whether or not the other will that was presented, how it was forged, who forged it, and where did it come from. So that's what we got to figure out. And then we have that going on, and then Hercule Poirot shows up at where Miss Oliver is staying, and they have a conversation about the things that are going on and everything. And I will say that I was right in thinking that these events are closely related, because yeah, I think so. There's several different parts in this, several deaths in here that are playing a part together, and Hercule Poirot, several of these deaths in here are going to end up connecting and playing a part. Even Poirot thinks so. So I am on the right track there. However, I know that apparently Miss Drake is not having an affair with Michael Garfield. I keep looking over because I keep forgetting their names. Yes. So Mrs. Drake is not having an affair with Michael Garfield. He has some kind of weird thing going on with Miranda, which I'm not really okay with. Do they have, I mean, I don't know what's going on with their relationship, but he was drawing Miranda, and he's talking about leaving because he's tired of being there and doesn't want to have to quarrel with Miss Drake because he feels that Miss Drake will run over him. I'm still not 100% convinced that it's not Mrs. Drake. I'm honestly not sure exactly who it could be. Poirot just left the garden. He was talking to Mr. Garfield and getting information on Leslie and his forgery problem and his death, as well as Olga and the forgery problem there and what's going on there. And he asked whether or not Olga and Leslie had a relationship, and he said that Michael said that he did see them together at some point, but he didn't think that Miss Smythe knew about it because she would not agree with that relationship at all, because Leslie was not a very good person. So that's the information that's come out. Where am I? What am I thinking now? I am still very wary of Mrs. Drake. I am still very wary of a lot of people on here. Mrs. Whitaker has been brought forth by several people. I forgot to even include, Poirot went to speak to the lady that pretended to be the witch at the party. He also went and talked to the two teenage boys who helped decorate, climbed ladders and stuff. So that is where the information that they gave. So I'm really not sure. My gut instinct says that it was Mrs. Drake and possibly someone else. Because who would Mrs. Drake be confused about? Who would Mrs. Drake be startled to see coming out of the library? I have no idea. So I'll be right back. Okay, big update. Okay, so Mrs. Drake showed up at Poirot's place that he was staying and told him that Leopold was found dead. So someone murdered Leopold, which is Joyce's brother, and that's sad. It's so sad. Then she comes clean. Mrs. Drake comes clean and says that she actually saw Leopold leaving the library. That was who she saw leaving the library, and she didn't want to come forth and say that it was him because with him being so young, he was 10, she felt that he didn't know what he was doing and wanted to secretly just get him some help instead of him being arrested and all this other kind of stuff. So she wanted to secretly get him some help, send him off and get help that way because he was so young. And now she realizes that when he was looking in the library, he either saw or figured out who the murderer was, the person who killed Joyce. And now he is dead as well. So there's also been a big thing going around saying that Leopold actually likes to listen in on people and eavesdrop and get secret information and basically have them pay him. So pay him to keep their secrets quiet. So she believes that somebody's been paying him they believe that someone's been paying him to keep him quiet. And so now we are trying to figure out who that is. It's really sad. The boy was only 10 and it hurts my heart. It's sad. That mother lost 2 children. All right, now let's continue on. Okay, so Poirot says he knows who the murderer is. He went and saw the school headmaster or school teacher, Miss Emmeline, I think is her name. And he says that she knows who it is also, or at least has some sort of hunch on who it is. So my only guess is, I'm not really sure who it is. I don't think it's Mrs. Drake anymore, but it could possibly be Mrs. Whitaker. It could still be, honestly, it could still be Mrs. Drake, and she's just putting on an act to clear her name. I'm not really sure with that either. It could be who knows? Who knows? Maybe Miranda? Because the people that Emmeline knows fairly well are Mrs. Whitaker and Miranda. She teaches Miranda. So, but I don't know if it would be Miranda though. I don't know. I'm gonna keep looking on and keep reading on and see exactly who it is. Maybe, I don't know. He's gathering everybody to talk to them, and we'll figure out who it is, I guess. So I am completely lost now. Like I said, I originally thought it was Mrs. Drake. It could still be Mrs. Drake, but now I'm leaning more towards Mrs. Whitaker because she was in the hallway, and she may have just been trying to frame Mrs. Drake with the whole, I saw her in the hallway and she was looking suspicious at the library, and she dropped a vase and broke it, and she was acting very suspicious. So it could be her. It could not be her. It could be somebody else. I don't know. But poor Leopold tried to bribe the killer to get money and ended up dying for it. And that stinks. I'm not very I don't do child deaths very well. So let's move on, find out who the murderer is. There is a body been found in the well that's in the garden that has been boarded up. I left out that little bit of information. I didn't think that it was really needed, but you know what? I'm gonna just say every little bit of information is important. Apparently, when Poirot was talking to Miranda and Garfield in the garden the last time, they were talking about how Miranda was looking for a well, and that Miss whatever her name is that dressed up as the witch told her there was one there, and Garfield was like, I don't think there's a well here. There's a tree though that people used to wish at. There is another wishing well somewhere else in town. And so that was the information that was given, and now a body has been found, I think under the tree that was burnt, that people walked around 3 times and did the whole wish. So apparently Miranda has also seen a murder, and so Poirot has been trying to get Mrs. Oliver and the mother Judith to quickly get out. So I'm wondering now if the murderer is Michael Garfield, because that's the only thing that could possibly make sense, because he was very, very interested in Miranda. So that's one thing that would make sense to me. I don't know. So is it Michael Garfield? If that's the case, that means he's killed quite a few people. So I'm gonna continue listening. Currently, they found the girl Olga in the well or under the tree, whichever you want to call it. And so yeah, that's where I'm at now in the story. It's got about 30 minutes left, so it's gonna be wrapping up pretty quickly. They're trying to rush Miranda to London so she can tell everybody who the murderer is, and they are able to keep her safe. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to stop here and see if it is Michael Garfield. So Miranda, for some reason, ran out the door and got in a car with two men, one of them with a gray beard. The way they are described, is it the two boys? The two teenage boys that were at the party? I can't remember the name. Like, Nicholas was one of them, and I can't remember what the other one was. I didn't write it down. Out of all the people I wrote down, I didn't write their names down. But I'm wondering if it is the boys, because one of them had sideburns, and one of them had long hair, and I'm wondering. This is interesting. This is not turning out the way I thought. Okay, so the two boys that were seen in the car were Nicholas Ransom and Desmond somebody. So those two were in a different car, but there's the gray bearded guy that's different. I got that a little confused listening to it. It sounded like they were all in the same car, but no, it was the gray bearded guy was driving with Miranda in the car, and the two younger people were in a different vehicle, and that happened to be Nicholas and Desmond. So those are those two, and they saved Miranda from being killed by the murderer, which I am guessing is Michael Garfield. So that's pretty much what I'm going for, is Michael Garfield. So yeah, let's finish the story. I was I actually called it way earlier in the book. It was Mrs. Drake and Mr. Garfield. They were having an affair. I got it this time. I got it. But she tricked me. She tricked me, Mrs. Drake. Coming to Poirot and crying. I had an inkling that it might just be to throw him off her trail, but still, though, I did call it. I did. I said that it was those two. There was just too many things going on, and then what I didn't know is that Miranda is actually Michael Garfield's daughter, and he didn't know, but I guess he had an inkling of a feeling that she was her daughter, or she was his daughter. So it's interesting. I actually got it this time, although I was a little confused there towards the end. Holy moly, I was. She got me with with Mrs. Drake. But Joyce wasn't the one that saw the murder, though. It was Miranda that saw the murder. And because Miranda and Joyce were best friends, Miranda told Joyce about the murder, about her seeing the murder, and Joyce being the liar that she is, she told it and said that she's the one that saw the murder. So therefore, Mrs. Drake killed Joyce at the party and used the vase to cover up being wet, which is what Mrs. Whitaker saw. And then, yeah, I actually cannot believe that I guessed that pretty early on. I thought it was just a wild guess out of nowhere. I cannot believe that I actually guessed it. I almost decided to cut it out after I recorded it too, because I was like, no, it is too far-fetched. It is too early in the book for me to be making wild guesses like this. And it ended up being correct. Wow. I didn't think I would actually get it. Okay, so that is it. That is all of the book. I enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun to go through, and actually I have my whiteboard with all of my color markers. And funny enough, yeah, I didn't even mean to do it, but everybody that was involved in the murder ended up being purple. So I did Joyce, I did Mrs. Drake, Miranda, Mrs. Lemonsaw, Mrs. Smith, and then Leslie and Olga supposedly knew each other, and then Olga did not return home. Leopold is dead, and then Michael Garfield. Oop, I just erased it, but Michael Garfield right here. So it's interesting. I had a lot of fun with this one. I enjoyed the story more than I thought I was going to. I had a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And if you were reading along while going through this with me, that I'm so grateful that you did. Anyway, this is it. I will get this uploaded as soon as I can. Hopefully this weekend, maybe Monday. Not really sure, but I will see you all next time. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And don't forget to like and subscribe and comment below and let me know what gave you the clues as to who the murderer was going to be. Mine, it really had to do with the vase and with Michael Garfield being kind of weird and focusing a lot on Miranda. That was another red flag. But those were my biggest clues. So, yes, I will see you all next time. Bye!